goes. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. The tiny dancer, the former mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, to those unfamiliar with the nickname I popularized. He writes in the Wall Street Journal about energy because he is trying to present himself as some sort of practical, moderate type new Democrat. The record reflects otherwise, but okay, we'll run with it. On energy, Democrats can learn from Texas. Oh, that sounds very solutionist. But then, as per usual, you start to dig into what Rahm and so many who present themselves similarly, and there's not many, frankly, at least those aspiring to be president, as he is. You dig into it and you hear a lot of the same rap. Talking about data centers and the data center wars ongoing across the fruited plains. Rather than maintain Mr. Obama's all-of-the-above approach to energy, Republicans neglected energy innovation and embraced a drill, baby, drill mentality. How did that go? Not terrible. We're energy independent because of it, but okay. The Chinese now produce roughly 4 to 5 of the planet's solar panels and battery cells, while we ask ordinary ratepayers to foot the bill for electricity demand fueled by tech billionaires and hyperscalers. You don't need to be a political genius to realize these Hunger Games aren't politically sustainable. There's the sort of balanced, policy-oriented rhetoric. Yeah, okay. Please. Feeding the hysteria while pretending to be the, hey, let's let cooler heads prevail here. Let's have a reasonable discussion about the AI revolution and tech and data centers and community interests and so on and so forth. Instead, it's this, I'm a reasonable guy, but Hunger Games and hyperscalers and tech billionaires, all the buzzwords. He's such a hack. And it's so tiresome. But I'll tell you what, there is, as our next guest wrote about, there is one example where the progress towards solutions with respect to supplying the necessary energy to power a $30 trillion economy in today's numbers. There's one example where the Neo-Luddites were successful, and that's nuclear. So it can be done, and I wouldn't be dismissive of the political forces afoot, particularly in this populist era, that cross the spectrum when it comes to data centers and tech development. Not when you have Comrade Bernie out there wanting the government to take a 50% stake in all tech companies, AI companies. Mark Mills is the founder and executive director of the National Center for Energy Analytics. He joins us now. Mark, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Great to be back, Dan. And tell me what you really think about your former mayor.
Well, it's probably more vitriolic than you'll get elsewhere, just because we had 8 years of him as mayor, in addition to his time as a congresshuman, in addition to his time at the White House, and he's just, this act just gets so tiresome, and yet it persists. But talk to us. Give us your perspective on the data center wars, because you wrote an extensive piece over at City Journal about it.
Yeah, and thanks for that, Dan. It was I thought a lot about the data center resistance, which is growing, and I've got another piece coming out shortly at City Journal, because it's not just growing, but it's metastasizing. It's an iconic pivot around which both Republicans and Democrats are having political challenge.
And Mark, you're fading on us a little bit. Just
Oh, is that?
Yeah, that's better.
Sorry about that. That's a little better.
Yeah.
So let's just take a statement that Rahm Emanuel had in his Wall Street Journal piece. that about how China has been brilliant about capturing the solar market and how we made the mistake of doing and using Trump's line, drill baby drill. To your point, the fact that the United States is now the world's biggest producer and exporter of natural gas and oil products is helped stabilize the disruption that goes on in markets, whether it's in the Strait of Hormuz or anything else that will happen in the future. So that's a good outcome. But the most important point is the construct that is being peddled. And it's embarrassing that some people on the other side of the political aisle have bought into this construct, that data centers are increasing the cost of electricity for people. The data show, not the data centers, but the actual data show that's not true. What's increased the cost of electricity is almost entirely the result of state and federal mandates and subsidies to push more solar and wind on the grids. That's what's increased the cost of electricity. The data centers that are being built haven't been built yet. They're not consuming electricity yet. It's like worrying about how much gasoline you're buying for your car while the car is still in the factory and you haven't even taken delivery of it yet. There's a causation problem with this trope that's being peddled. So it is reasonable to worry about what will happen when these big data centers come online. We know we have some good idea what will happen, but insofar as the current so-called affordability crisis for electric rates, it's not coming from data centers. It's coming from bad policies in many states, and it's highly correlated with pushing too much wind and solar on the grids, which increases costs to operate the grids, requires more transmission, all the things that state regulators and many utilities have encouraged, pushed, or mandated. So it's a rich irony, I guess you'd have to say. So what they're hoping to do is harvest the money, to use Bernie Sanders' words, of tech oligarchs to pay for their sins of the past and hide the mistakes they've made in energy markets.
And the nuclear example too. I mean, it's as you write about. I mean, that's the one. Particularly with the climate change hysteria on the wane. This is something that these Chicken Littles can grab onto, but they don't usually find success. Although they didn't find success at a massive cost over the last 30 years with respect to climate change. And, the apocalyptic predictions, the supremacy that punctuated that movement. So, I mean, it wasn't wholly unsuccessful. They imposed a massive cost for no particular reason. But with nuclear, they were actually able to staunch the development of nuclear power.
Oh, absolutely. So you framed it precisely correctly. There have been real costs to American citizens and the Europeans, frankly, for imposing climate-inspired energy policies. The West, Europe and the United States have spent close to $20 trillion over the last 2 decades to avoid using oil and gas. And what has happened over those 2 decades is the consumption of oil and gas has increased, not decreased. And for those who have anxiety about carbon dioxide emissions, they've gone up. They haven't leveled out. They haven't gone down. Or put in simple terms, that $20 trillion has bought nothing except the transfer of wealth. A lot of it from American taxpayers and ratepayers to China, which sells, of course, the materials and chemicals for the solar panels and the batteries. The thing that worries me is that I feel like the data center resistance movement is disingenuous and highly politicized, I do worry, to your point, that we should not take it lightly. We should not assume that they won't succeed in impeding the development and production of new technologies like data centers and AI for productive uses, because they succeeded. The left succeeded in essentially killing the domestic U.S. nuclear industry. There was no new nuclear power plants built over the last 2 decades, except for 2 at great expense in Georgia. And good on Georgia Power for getting it done. But we have essentially seen zero advancement in the domestic U.S. nuclear industry almost entirely because of the success of the resistance movement that was launched by the left, which, and this is my speculation, but I think the data and history show this, the anti-Vietnam War movement was looking for something new to latch its political machinery to. And that was partly environmentalism, but especially anti-nuclear activism. And if you chase the history of the movement, they sort of steered the machine over towards frightening people about nuclear energy. Now people, have learned and understand that the incredibly safe machines, fantastic technology, but we essentially abandoned it. We're having to rebuild it. It's enormously expensive to rebuild an industry, and we're behind. China is building more nuclear power plants than any other country in the world, using the technology pioneered in the United States.
Well, to build nuclear in this country is not your old nuclear power plants from a couple of generations ago. You have these modular nuclear power centers that are coming online that are safe, effective, more efficient, don't have the same NIMBY problems that nuclear power plants have.
Well, first of all, let's be clear. If you're building a nuclear power plant today, you're going to be building the big guys that we've been building and know how to build for years. The new ones, the new small ones, which will become practical in due course, are all aspirational at the moment. And also, just to be clear, the framing that the new ones are safer than the old ones, okay, I get that. I mean, it's a marketing push that the small reactor guys are pushing. And trust me, I love small reactors. I think they're great. I can't wait to own my own personal reactor in my house.
Okay, there you go. By the way, that's a supercharged generator, yeah.
Well, there are several reactor designs that are that size. They're mainly for the space program, but they are sized for your house, the size of a large commercial refrigerator. You probably can't buy one, but they do exist. But seriously, the big reactors are very safe. They've been incredibly safe. The only nuclear power accident that sadly has killed people was a disastrous design, the Soviet, Chernobyl.
Chernobyl, yeah, right.
And those kinds of reactors don't exist in the West. No one would ever build something like that except the Soviets. So the idea that the new ones are safer than the old ones is sort of, okay, zero fatalities is zero, right? It's hard to beat zero.
No, I don't necessarily mean the old ones are unsafe. I just meant, the efficiency and the space and the NIMBY issues more.
Yeah. But I won't. Let's just go. Let's go with what the anti-nuclear movement is saying and the environmental movement is saying. Almost without exception, today's environmentalists oppose nuclear energy. Still.
Right. Yeah.
So you can bet the first time somebody tries to cite a small reactor in a place where there hasn't been one, that the anti-nuclear NIMBYism will pop up again. I just don't believe for a second that they're going to give up, and that they will look for ways to oppose it. But you're absolutely right. So, a smaller reactor that has essentially an on-off switch that you could put in the ground and doesn't need fueling except every 5 to 10 years. I mean, what a great thing that would be for remote communities, villages, towns, data centers, and of the 100+ different designs that are being built right now, and believe me, there's over 100 different designs. Every one of them will work, technically. I mean, it's not like we've rediscovered nuclear fission. What we don't know yet is which ones will be economical and be built at scale.
Uh-huh.
And fortunately, both the private sector, which is a lot of industries and venture capitalists, and the government, and both parties are wildly enthusiastic about nuclear energy again. So this is all very good. But the most important point is where we started this, is that we were on that track 40 years ago, right? And we got derailed by a hypertrophied, totally constructed fears around nuclear energy by what have to be called the extreme environmental movements of that day. They are the same people, by the way. They haven't gone away. They're still around, and they're still doing the same kinds of things. And I think they've decided, there's some irony in this, that data centers are their new vector to go after. But the true irony is a lot of the data center hyperscalers are the ones funding new nuclear power plants. So they're going to get caught in the double crosshairs, I'm afraid.
Yeah, but I mean, as you say, it's just it's the politics of it. As I said, the populist politics of it, which has appeal. And even if you lose, you potentially generate huge wealth transfer, and perhaps some gain in political power in the process of these witch burnings that they do. I want to get reaction to something too. David Sachs, the tech entrepreneur and crypto czar, I guess. He had posted this on X last month. Back of the envelope numbers for a 1 gigawatt data center. All in capex is about $50 billion. Enterprise revenue generated is $25 to $30 billion a year. Electricity costs is $1 to $2 billion a year. So the data center return, 2 years you get paid back your $50 billion in capex. And his conclusion, the boom is real. Do you agree with that sort of thumbnail sketch?
Yeah, I think he's slightly optimistic about the revenue return, but I think his thumbnail is correct. And the important part of that thumbnail is that it tells you that the reason there's a boom going on is because the people doing the building. But it's really important to keep in mind, this is not a boom with people building things on the backs of government subsidies and government mandates.
Right.
This is on the backs of an expectation and the realization that markets are buying and using the tools. You could take to the bank that as it has happened with every new technology, we will eventually overbuild the capacity to supply what people want in the short term. That'll happen. That's what competition does. But we're not anywhere close to that right now. There's a really interesting point in his data, which I've written about as well, is that if you look at a $50 billion data center that generates $25 billion a year of revenue, the electricity costs are 5% of operating it. So, the $1 billion and change. Well, that will tell you something, right? That would say, to be simplistic, the data center hyperscalers are essentially insensitive to the price of electricity, which should tell you something about why what's happening is this rush to find every possible means to supply power for these data centers. It's because you can't run them unless you can plug them into something. And if the cost to plugging them in is 50% higher than what the market offers, you'll pay it because it doesn't really change the bottom line for you very much. What matters is that you can actually get the power and build the thing.
Well, so then, when you have proposals, Trump even telegraphed this in the State of the Union with respect to the data centers. These tech companies they can't connect to the grid. They have to sort of build their own electrical infrastructure. That you're suggesting, well, that's not a problem for them as long as they can find the sites. They can do it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in fact. So the way the president frames it, in fact, many governors are doing the same thing in both red and blue states, is that the deep-pocketed data center hyperscalers, you need to pay your way, either build your own power or pay for the cost of the public grid providing it. And frankly, they would much rather go on the public grid and just pay the vig if they could. What's actually happening is that the public grids, by and large, can't meet the demand at this pace that they need it. It's coming too fast and too big. So somewhere between a third and a half of the data centers that are under construction are what I'm calling private grids. They're not connected to public grids. They're using the same the same technologies, the same constructors, the same kinds of power plants, mostly gas-fired turbines, but they're also using batteries that to moderate solar and wind. But mostly it's gas. It's about 80% of all the new construction for power for data centers, natural gas. And I think we're going to see that trend continues. I think it's the handwriting's on the wall, which would be a good thing because they'll get built and they will have no impact on public grid rates because they aren't connected to the public grid. The bad thing will be that those politicians are hoping to harvest the money from those hyperscalers to pay for their mistakes on public grids. They won't be on
the public grid. Yeah, right. Yeah, there you go. The good news and the bad news is. Yeah, right.
Exactly. It'll be like the Warren Buffett line, and the tide's going to go out, and we'll find out who's wearing a swimsuit.
Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Shark Tank, Mr. Wonderful. He's in a very public fight in Utah for location of a data center. And one of the things that he has done is raise the specter that the Chinese Communist Party is trying to foment opposition to data centers in this country, for the purposes of inhibiting technological advancement inhibiting our development of AI in this country in this arms race, this AI arms race. I know there's some truth to that, but do you think that's the best approach, sort of, sensibly? I mean, it seems to me that the what O'Leary misses in taking this approach and being very antagonistic to the local population is that is the populist appeal that this has, and you have to address the quality of life and NIMBY concerns and some of the things you're talking about with the public versus private grid in a way that doesn't just sort of like appeal to, the Chinese Communist Party or the Europeans, and you're anti-American if you're not supporting this, like O'Leary is doing.
Yeah, I think I can sympathize with what you can imagine. He and his colleagues are putting up private capital to build something that's really quite remarkable and magical, which will bring wealth to the state, and to have this kind of blowback. And you can sympathize with it, but I agree with you. I think the strategy, the truth is that how you approach this has to recognize that a lot of people have valid concerns. It could be aesthetic; they don't like it. They don't like the construction. It's in a rural area, and these are big construction projects. They're bigger than building skyscrapers. I mean, in terms of steel and concrete and trucks. So people have real concerns, even if the concerns have been whipped up and hyped up by bad actors who are just manipulating. Nobody wants to be told they're being manipulated by a bad actor when they have a valid concern. So I agree. Really, every industry has had this problem, including the nuclear industry, by the way, in the early days. How do they get their so-called social license to operate, to build, to have the local community accept them coming there? I mean, think the analogy is exactly the same. Nuclear power plants, these massive, gigawatt nuclear power plants, don't provide any electricity for the people who live in the area where the plant exists. The electricity is sent on grids far away. So why should they put up with that huge construction project? Data centers, the same thing. You have to really take it seriously. You have to be sensitive.
Yeah, and the other issue and the other comparison, too, is the water for cooling. We just got a text from somebody who's in the industry, a hydrogeologist. A huge issue for data centers, water for cooling. I work to find sources and model groundwater modeling that predicts effects on groundwater source and impacts on flow. So this is certainly part of the discussion at the local level, too, is what the cooling that's required, the water that's needed for the cooling of these plants, and what impact, if any, will it have on our water tables, and that's an aspect of the quality of life discussion.
Well, so those are the kind of questions that are reasonable to ask, but this is where the problem begins, where people are making claims and saying things that are just not only wrong, but in fact egregiously wrong. So the truth is, if you need a lot of water for cooling anything, you have to get permissions in any jurisdiction here in the United States to use water. The other truth is that data centers don't have to net use water. They can do what's called closed loop cooling, the way a car works. You just recirculate the water and you blow fans across the radiators. But this is the key point. In the kind of locations where data centers are being put, which is farmland and semi-rural territory, the amount of water that a data center uses in areas is a fraction of the amount of water that, say, a corn farm uses. In fact, irrigating the land that Kevin O'Leary is planning to put his data centers on uses 200 times more water for agriculture than the data centers will use. 200 times more for agriculture. So if you really worry about water use and water tables, and this is, of course, an ongoing issue in the United States, then the things you have to focus on are not data centers. They're agricultural use of water. So the solution is, in fact, what some of these hyperscalers are already doing, is they're getting involved in local water issues to not be a net user of water, but a net creator of net new water by cleaning up unusable groundwater, salty water, and not just to cool a data center, but provide more water to the local community and agriculture. So I think they figured this out, but what's going on in the meantime, even though they're doing the right thing, and based on what I've seen announced, what's actually happening, the hype and the misinformation around the idea that data centers are massive water users and polluting groundwater tables, they've sort of taken the playbook out of fracking and applied it to data centers. And if ever there were a misapplication of real data, well, this was a prime example. So it is a concern from people, but it's not a real concern in terms of what's actually happening.
Mark Mills is the founder and executive director of the National Center for Energy Analytics. His latest piece, Data Center Resistance, Deja Vu All Over Again, that we were discussing. Mark, thanks as always. Always appreciate your insights and industry knowledge. Appreciate it.
It was great to be on. Have a great summer. Good to talk to you again, Dan.
Good to talk to you. And Mark joined us on the alphawealthgroup.com answer line. Now let's check the headlines with Mike Scott.
8:34, 64 degrees. More clouds, a bit windy, a few breaks of sunshine, and there could be chance thunderstorms by the afternoon with a high of 75. Multiple people are under arrest after discussing plans to attack a UFC event at the White House.
5 people are in custody and nearly 24 individuals have been identified as part of a potential network of plotters intending to crash explosive-laden drones in the buildings near the White House and then storm the White House gates during Sunday's UFC Freedom 250 event. Officials say the FBI first learned of the alleged plot last Wednesday and arrested one suspect in Cincinnati. Investigators then uncovered signal chats with discussions of the plans. One suspect is said to have told investigators the goal was to target capitalist elites, billionaires, and politicians receiving donations from the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. At the White House, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
Georgia, Alabama, Oklahoma, and Washington, D.C. are holding primary elections today. President Trump touting a newly announced deal with Iran at the G7 summit. Vice President J.D. Vance also spoke about the new deal.
What the agreement does say, Sean, is again, if the Iranians